With just under 2 weeks until Christmas, residents of western Kentucky were preparing their usual holiday traditions. However, on December 10, 2021, an extremely rare, late-season severe weather system threatened much of the central U.S. with the risk of violent tornadoes. Just before 9:30 p.m. in Mayfield, Kentucky, business was going as usual at the Mayfield Consumer Products candle factory. Nearly 110 employees were working the late-night shifts, as they always did on a Friday night. However, on this Friday night in December, the entire region was under a moderate risk for the possibility of numerous violent tornadoes. Earlier in the day, a tornado warning had been issued for the factory, but fortunately, nothing had come of it. After the tornado warning left the area, many of the employees requested to go home, as a second round of tornado potential was expected to move in later that night. However, management threatened to fire anyone who left the factory prematurely, even with the second round of tornadoes looming. As the factory employees got back to work, they were unaware of the devastation that would come in just a few hours. Just 4 hours after the first tornado warning was issued for the area, a tornado emergency was issued for the town of Mayfield. Just miles to the southwest, a massive, violent tornado was ripping its way towards the factory. Frantically, the workers in the factory ran for cover as the mile-wide tornado neared closer and closer. In an instant, the violent tornado with over 190 mile-per-hour winds shredded the large, metal-framed warehouse. The roof of the factory immediately collapsed, trapping all 110 employees inside and killing 8. In just under 3 hours, the violent wedge tornado ripped a nearly mile-wide path through the heart of southeastern Missouri, northwestern Tennessee, and western Kentucky, killing 57 people, injuring 519 others, and leaving a trail of complete destruction in its wake. Two days before the 10th, on December 8, 2021, the Storm Prediction Center outlined a slight risk of severe weather across a broad area of the Mississippi Valley. They mentioned that, despite the potential for a higher-end severe weather threat to materialize, forecasters were uncertain about the extent of instability, degree of directional wind shear, and late timing of potential storms. Instability, one of the lacking severe weather ingredients at this point in the forecast, is also known as CAPE. CAPE, or convective available potential energy, is the measurement of instability in the atmosphere that is needed to produce potent severe thunderstorms. Wind shear, another lacking severe weather ingredient at this point, is the change in wind speed and direction with height, which organizes thunderstorms into rotating supercells. Additionally, the timing of storms is highly important to a severe weather event, as later storms generally have less instability to work with than daytime storms. However, later storms tend to have greater low-level wind shear needed to produce strong tornadoes due to the low-level jet. The low-level jet, or LLJ, commonly kicks in the late evening hours and can rapidly cause potent supercells to become much more conducive for tornadoes due to greatly increased low-level shear. However, as December 8th went on, the models only continued to show an increase in instability and wind shear. The following day, the SPC upgraded their forecast to an enhanced risk, mentioning organized severe thunderstorms in a region between southeastern Arkansas and southern Indiana. As for the specific risks of this outlook, the SPC highlighted a 10% risk for significant tornadoes, a 30% risk of damaging winds, and a marginal 5% risk for hail throughout the region of the outlook. As the 10th loomed nearer, the models continued to increase the severity of the forecast. The main reason for the forecast upgrades in the region was due to an increased confidence in a powerful upper-level trough across the high plains, with robust instability and moisture return across the Mississippi Valley. The powerful upper-level trough brought ample wind shear to maintain storms and provided low-level spin needed to form tornadoes. With the now forecasted robust instability and moisture return across the Mississippi Valley, combined with the powerful upper-level trough, the potential for a major late-season tornado outbreak became more and more likely. Now, while major December tornado outbreaks are uncommon, they are not impossible. However, it is extremely rare to see such extreme kinematics and thermodynamics aligned to this degree at this time of year. Additionally, another thing that made the forecast particularly concerning is that people tend to be caught more off guard at this time of year due to misconceptions that tornadoes will only occur in the spring and summer. With all of this in mind, the SPC decided to upgrade their forecast to a moderate risk at the 1630Z outlook on the 10th. In this outlook, the SPC mentioned a 15% risk for significant tornadoes, a 30% chance for damaging wind gusts, and a large 15% risk for large hail throughout nearly the entire Mississippi Valley. As the morning of the 10th grew closer, the potential for a significant tornado outbreak only continued to increase further and further. As the sun rose on the morning of the 10th, the environment began to prime itself for the looming severe weather likely later in the day. Widespread dew points of up to nearly 70 degrees were present for much of the Mississippi Valley, with the temperature rising into the lower to mid-70s. Cloud cover was the main limiting factor for this event, with the instability needed for storms completely relying on the ability for some clearing in the region. However, as evident from satellite imagery throughout the day, the clouds were breaking and clearing more than enough to destabilize the atmosphere. By mid to late afternoon, Cape values were in the 1 to 2,000 joules per kilogram range. Additionally, nearly 60 to 70 knots of effective shear were present throughout the region. This rare overlap of both environmental conditions continued to worry forecasters around the region. As the day went on, the upper-level trough continued to move into the region, bringing shear and forcing needed to fire storms. This powerful upper-level trough moved across the region, causing height falls and strengthening winds aloft to 90 to 100 knots by evening. These height falls, in conjunction with the cold front, allowed for ample forcing and lift to initiate storms. To put it simply, lift triggers upward air motion and sparks storm development. So, the potent upper-level shortwave, combined with the surface cold front, provided the necessary lift to initiate explosive thunderstorms over the region. This powerful shortwave and strengthening winds aloft allowed for ample wind shear to sustain storms. At 1:35 p.m., the first mesoscale discussion was issued for the area, mentioning the potential for discrete supercell development by 4 to 6 p.m. They mentioned that these storms would have potential for severe hail and tornadoes, including increasing potential for a couple of strong tornadoes by early evening. By 3 p.m., a tornado watch was issued for the region, mentioning the increasing potential for a few strong tornadoes into the night, as well as the potential for damaging winds and large hail. By around 5 p.m., storms had begun firing along the cold front. These storms began as completely isolated supercells. If this isolated storm mode could continue until the better low-level shear arrived later in the evening, the potential for significant and possibly even violent tornadoes would skyrocket. Storm mode is extremely important in severe weather forecasting due to the different impacts the different types of storm types can have. For example, a more linear mode usually causes more widespread wind events with less hail and strong tornado potential, while a more isolated threat can cause more significant hail and tornado threat. However, as the sun set and the low-level wind shear continued to increase, it became more obvious that the supercells would remain isolated. A tornado outbreak just 2 weeks before Christmas was imminent. Numerous supercells fired along the cold front as it continued to push eastward in the late afternoon. However, one supercell in particular fired near Arkadelphia, Arkansas at approximately 5 p.m. in nearly the perfect overlap of wind shear and instability. As the storm continued northeastward, it continued to mature for just under 2 hours before the first tornado warning was issued around 7 p.m. Soon after becoming tornado warned, the storm began producing a tornado in northeastern Arkansas. The first tornado touched down in Craighead County, Arkansas, just north of Bay, at 7:07 p.m., initially causing minor EF0 tree and outbuilding damage. As the tornado moved through the south side of Bowman, it caused EF0 to EF1 damage as roofs were damaged, power poles and tree limbs were downed, and a radio antenna at a residence was bent. The tornado then quickly intensified to EF2 strength as it crossed Arkansas 18 and passed northwest of Lake City, downing trees and damaging or destroying some metal outbuildings. A house also sustained minor damage in this area, and Arkansas 135 north of town was shut down due to downed power lines as well. The tornado then grew to a width of 800 yards as it crossed County Road 505 and tracked to the northeast, snapping power poles and unroofing a house along County Road 508. Another house sustained major roof damage in this area, an irrigation pivot sprinkler was overturned, and a silo was damaged. The tornado then reached EF3 strength as it moved through the western and northern fringes of Monette at 7:23 p.m., resulting in significant damage. 2 industrial buildings were destroyed at the west edge of town, and many trees and power poles were snapped. The Monette Manor nursing home was also struck by the tornado, killing 1 person and trapping 20 other residents and employees, including 5 people who were seriously injured. The building sustained major structural damage, losing much of its roof and sustaining the collapse of the nearby masonry exterior walls. Multiple homes and mobile homes were damaged or destroyed in a neighborhood near the nursing home, and several large grain silos were torn apart. Maximum wind speeds in the Monette area were estimated 143 miles per hour. The tornado then continued at low-end EF3 intensity as it crossed into northwestern Mississippi County, striking the northern part of Leachville at 7:30 p.m. As the tornado crossed Arkansas 77, it completely destroyed a local Dollar General store, sweeping a large portion off its foundation and killing the store's assistant manager. A few metal frame warehouses and buildings along Arkansas 77 were badly damaged or destroyed, cars and semis were tossed, and multiple homes and mobile homes were damaged or destroyed in the town. In town, extensive tree damage occurred, and numerous buildings in downtown Leachville had roofing blown off. Maximum wind speeds in Leachville were estimated 145 miles per hour. The tornado then continued northeast for 6 miles and grew larger as it passed the rural community of Buckeye, and very intense tree damage was noted along West County Road 38. An entire row of large trees was completely debarked at EF3 strength at this location. The tornado also snapped power poles and destroyed an outbuilding in this area. As the tornado then crossed the state line into Dunklin County in the Missouri Boot Heel at 7:40 p.m., high-end EF2 damage occurred as multiple outbuildings, mobile homes, and houses were damaged or destroyed. The tornado then continued south of Hornersville and over the Hornersville Swamp Conservation Area. Here, trees and power poles were damaged, and a mobile home also sustained minor damage. Further to the northeast, the damage became more severe again as multiple metal truss transmission towers were twisted or collapsed near the County Road 722. Damage in this area was rated at EF3. One house, also along the periphery of the circulation, also sustained minor damage, and some power poles were pushed over as well. High-end EF2 damage occurred as the tornado then crossed into Pemiscot County, west of Steele. Trees were snapped, power poles were downed, a couple of homes were heavily damaged, and a pickup truck was tossed along the segment of the path. The tornado then passed just south of Braggadocio, damaging or destroying some barns and outbuildings and inflicting roof damage to homes. As the tornado moved to the intersection of State Highway J and County Highway 407 just east of town, it abruptly became violent, causing low-end EF4 damage as 2 houses were swept from their foundations and scattered across fields. Unfortunately, a 9-year-old girl was killed here, and her parents and 2 younger sisters were injured in the destruction of one of the homes. The tornado then crossed I-55 just south of Haiti and weakened back to EF2 strength and blew multiple semi-trailer trucks and a car off the highway into a field. Several semi-truck drivers were injured here, and the driver of the car was killed. In addition to the 2 fatalities, at least 9 people overall were injured in the county. An indirect fatality also occurred when a vehicle struck a downed utility pole, and 2 indirect injuries were also confirmed as well. As the tornado continued just east of Haiti, it caused additional EF2 power pole damage and then crossed the Mississippi River into Lake County, Tennessee around 8:20 p.m. It briefly crossed a bend in the river back into Missouri before crossing into Lake County once again. Moving through central Lake County, the tornado narrowly missed the small community of Windberg, producing EF3 damage in the rural areas outside town, where numerous large trees were snapped and some were debarked. Metal high-tension power poles were also bent to the ground in this area as well. The tornado then reached peak intensity for a second time near Tiptonville as it moved across the southern shore of Reelfoot Lake, striking the Cypress Point Resort and causing 3 fatalities. A bait and tackle shop also sustained EF4 damage as it was swept clean from its foundation, with only a bare concrete slab remaining. Multiple cottages, houses, and cabins were also destroyed, while a couple of 2-story hotel buildings sustained total destruction of their top floors and collapse of many walls on their first floors, with the damage to the structures being rated EF3. A gift shop and a restaurant also sustained severe damage. Large amounts of debris were scattered throughout the area, and several people sustained serious injuries at the resort. The tornado then crossed the southeastern part of the lake before moving ashore again as it reached Obion County, causing high-end EF2 damage as it damaged or destroyed cabins, outbuildings, and houses near Lake Drive. One person was killed in a mobile home park in this area when their RV was destroyed. Continuing at high-end EF2 strength, the tornado narrowed as it impacted the small town of Sandburg, resulting in major damage along SR 22. Houses in town had roofs and exterior walls ripped off, RV campers were tossed, and mobile homes were destroyed. The City Hall building, post office, a gas station, and several other buildings were damaged or destroyed as well. Northeast of town, the tornado began to weaken, with the roof being blown off of a farm building along Old Sandburg Road. Trees and tree limbs were also downed, and the damage was rated EF1 in this area. The tornado then continued northeastward along the road, causing EF0 tree limb damage until it dissipated approximately 2.5 miles northeast of Sandburg at 8:36 p.m. In total, this tornado was rated a low-end EF4 with wind speeds estimated at 170 miles per hour. The tornado had reached a peak width of 1,800 yards along 81.17-mile path through the portions of 3 states, while remaining on the ground for 89 minutes. Unfortunately, 8 fatalities and 1 indirect fatality occurred, with directly 16 injuries and 2 indirect injuries, some of which were serious. After the tornado dissipated, the parent supercell entered a cycling phase, producing 3 brief tornadoes, one rated EF1 and the other 2 rated EF0, in Obion County northeast of Sandburg and west of Union City. However, as the storm passed to the northwest of Union City, it began producing an even stronger, longer track tornado than the first. The new tornado touched down in Woodland Mills, Tennessee, along Woodland Mills Road at 8:54 p.m. The tornado initially moved to the north side of Woodland Mills, causing minor damage to roofs and trees before crossing SR5. After moving northeast for 1/2 mile, rated EF0, across the Tennessee-Kentucky state line near the community of State Line in Fulton County, causing additional tree damage. The total damage already caused in Tennessee by the tornado was estimated at $25,000. The tornado then continued northeast at EF2 strength, tearing roofs off of homes, damaging or destroying outbuildings, damaging irrigation equipment, and ripping apart trailer homes. Soon after, the tornado became violent and directly impacted the small community of Case at low-end EF4 intensity, where homes and small businesses were damaged or destroyed, some of which were leveled or swept from their foundations. A music venue and a former school building was badly damaged, and the Case Volunteer Fire Department building was destroyed, the metal beams of the structure severely twisted as pieces of heavy machinery were tossed around. Several outbuildings and mobile homes were also destroyed. One person died in Case, and several others were injured. After moving northeast of Case, the tornado then weakened but remained strong as it moved at EF3 intensity through the rural areas northeast of town, destroying barns, a cell tower, and tearing the roof and exterior walls from a house. The tornado then moved into Hickman County and appeared to dramatically intensify as it crossed US 51, where extreme ground scouring occurred in nearby fields. Here, the tornado scoured trenches into the ground, removing all grass and several inches of topsoil in the worst affected areas. Fortunately, no structures were impacted near US 51, and no rating was applied to the scouring. EF3 damage continued past this point as homes and metal truss towers were destroyed. EF2 damage was noted as it tracked into Graves County, closely paralleling Purchase Parkway and US 45 and moving directly towards the city of Mayfield. The roof of a house along Kentucky 339 was torn off, and many trees and power lines were down in this area. At 9:26 p.m., the National Weather Service issued a tornado emergency for Mayfield, Kentucky, as the now massive wedge tornado approached the town from the southwest. A tornado emergency is an enhanced version of the tornado warning, which is used by the National Weather Service in the United States during imminent, significant tornado occurrences. As the tornado entered Mayfield, it regained EF4 intensity, and numerous homes along Cardinal Road were damaged or destroyed. Some houses were leveled or swept from their foundations. Trees in this area were completely debarked, cars were thrown, and mobile homes were completely destroyed. EF4 damage continued as the tornado crossed over Mayfield Bypass, where Mayfield Consumer Products, a candle factory with approximately 110 employees working, was flattened. The large, metal frame warehouse building collapsed, trapping employees, resulting in 8 deaths and numerous injuries. Allegedly, workers' jobs had been threatened if they left the factory between the first and second tornado warnings from the area. A tornado warning had been issued at approximately 5:30 p.m. that evening, and another one was issued at 9 p.m. On December 17, 2021, it was reported that multiple workers at the candle factory filed a lawsuit against the Mayfield Consumer Products in state court, seeking compensation and punitive damages. The lawsuit alleged that the factory had up to 3.5 hours to let the workers leave as safety precautions, and did not. And the company showed a flagrant indifference to the rights of workers and violated the Kentucky Occupational Safety and Health Workplace Standards by refusing evacuations. The following January, the factory closed, and the Mayfield Consumer Products laid off approximately 250 workers there, shifting operations and the remaining workers to a new plant in the nearby town of Hickory. On December 8, 2022, a second lawsuit was filed against the Mayfield Consumer Products on behalf of 3 workers who were killed in the candle factory collapse and the 7 who survived. The lawsuit alleged false imprisonment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violation of Kentucky statutory law. Unfortunately, many of these lawsuits are still open and unresolved to this day. As the tornado continued, several nearby industrial buildings were also damaged or destroyed, while semi-trucks and other industrial vehicles were thrown and destroyed, some being left unrecognizable. After briefly weakening to EF3 intensity, the tornado then again intensified, reaching just below high-end EF4 intensity as it moved along US 45 and tore through the center of Mayfield, resulting in widespread, catastrophic damage throughout the historic downtown square. Most of the structures in downtown Mayfield were heavily damaged or destroyed, including large, well-built, multi-story brick buildings that collapsed. Only large piles of brick and lumber remained in the hardest hit portions of the downtown area, and the streets were left buried under debris. The large, well-constructed Graves County warehouse had much of its roof torn off, its clock tower collapsed, and some of its exterior upper floor walls were demolished. Several restaurants, an indoor soccer facility, a barber shop, automotive business, a bank, a gym, a movie theater, a health and rehab center, and many other businesses in downtown Mayfield were destroyed. Large metal silos were crumpled and heavily damaged at a granary, and the large Mayfield water tower was toppled and destroyed. The post office, city hall, fire station, and police station were significantly damaged or destroyed, and the emergency operations center lost the ability to transmit radio communications. 3 large churches were destroyed in downtown Mayfield, including the First Presbyterian Church, a large, well-built brick structure that was mostly leveled. The domed roof and upper walls of the First Christian Church collapsed, as did the sanctuary of the First United Methodist Church, which was constructed using thick masonry exterior walls. A school bus garage, metal industrial buildings, and apartment buildings in other parts of town were damaged or destroyed. The tornado also devastated residential areas of town, leveling or sweeping numerous homes from their foundations. Radar imagery showed the tornado had lofted debris up to 30,000 feet as it impacted the city. 22 people were killed in and around Mayfield, and hundreds more were injured, many severely. The tornado's winds peaked at 188 miles per hour in the city. After leaving Mayfield, the tornado then weakened, producing damage at EF2 to EF3 strength, and continued northeastward along I-69 and Kentucky 58. A hangar and some small airplanes were destroyed at the Mayfield Graves County Airport, and homes, a nearby church, and a business were damaged. Further weakening occurred as the tornado continued to move northeast, and EF0 to EF1 damage occurred to trees and structures. The tornado then intensified again as it approached and crossed the Marshall County line along I-69 before moving through the northwestern and northern outskirts of Benton, damaging and destroying homes, garages, outbuildings, and flipping RV campers. Most of the damage through this section of Marshall County was ranged from EF2 to EF3, though a few of the homes in southwest of Benton were leveled or swept away from their foundations at high-end EF3 strength. The tornado then moved to Brainsburg at EF2 intensity. Houses near and along US 68 sustained partial to total roof loss, outbuildings were damaged or destroyed, and metal truss transmission towers were totally collapsed. Past Brainsburg, EF3 damage occurred along Lowry Road, where a poorly anchored house was leveled and some other homes sustained EF2 damage. The tornado then again reached EF4 intensity as it moved to the small community of Cambridge Shores, which is located along the western shore of Kentucky Lake. Numerous homes in the community, including large lakeside houses, were leveled and swept from their foundations. Large trees were snapped into bark and vehicles were thrown. The roof of a fire department building was torn off and large, metal, boat storage buildings were destroyed. The tornado then weakened but remained strong as it crossed Kentucky Lake into Lyon County and traversed the Land Between the Lakes National Recreation Area, leveling a large swath of trees and snapping power poles at EF2 strength as it passed near Twin Lakes before crossing Lake Barkley. After crossing Lake Barkley, the tornado strengthened back to EF3 intensity and crossed Kentucky 93 and I-24 near the lake's eastern shore, where many homes sustained major damage or were destroyed. Soon after, the tornado again explosively intensified and crossed into Caldwell County along Kentucky 293, producing EF4 damage as it impacted the southern edge of Princeton. A northern tornado emergency was issued. 2 miles before impacting Princeton, the tornado hit and destroyed a Kentucky mesonet station, which recorded 120.1 mile-per-hour winds, setting a new record for the highest measured wind gust in Kentucky history. Within 2 miles, the tornado's forward speed increased to up to 60 miles per hour. In Princeton, dozens of houses along the southern and southeastern fringes of town were destroyed, especially at the Princeton Golf and Country Club subdivision, where several houses were leveled or swept away. The University of Kentucky Research Center was destroyed. Metal roof trusses were carried hundreds of yards from the structure and wrapped around trees. Cars were thrown from parking lots into adjacent fields. Metal light poles were ripped from their concrete footings, and ground scouring occurred. In and around Princeton, trees were stripped of their limbs and partially debarked. Barns and farm buildings were destroyed. Livestock was killed, and cyclodial markings were left in fields outside of town. 4 deaths and numerous injuries occurred in Princeton. The tornado then followed US 62, producing EF2 to EF3 damage to homes in the small communities of Lewistown and Midway. Past Midway, the tornado became violent once again, reaching EF4 intensity as it moved along US 62, causing catastrophic damage as it entered the city of Dawson Springs, located along the Caldwell-Hopkins County line. A 4th tornado emergency was in effect for Dawson Springs and St. Charles as the storm moved through the area. In residential areas around Dawson Springs, entire blocks of homes were destroyed, and many houses were leveled or swept from their foundations. Cars were thrown, copious amounts of structural debris were thrown in all directions, and only rubble remained in the hardest hit neighborhoods. The Dawson Village apartment complex was destroyed, and several 2-story brick apartment buildings also sustained EF4 damage, being largely reduced to rubble, with only a few of the first-floor interior walls left intact. Meteorologist Timothy Marshall later published a damage survey from Dawson Springs that rated the apartment complex as mid-range EF3 intensity, with winds estimated 155 miles per hour due to structural flaws that were found. Several duplexes at Clarksville Court were destroyed, including one that was leveled with only a pile of debris remaining. An American Legion post and car wash were flattened, and a church and a medical clinic also sustained major damage. Multiple logistics facilities and warehouses in an industrial park were leveled as the tornado exited the city, as were several metal self-storage unit buildings and large garages nearby. 14 people were killed in the Dawson Springs area and many others were injured. A mother and her 2 children survived with major injuries by holding on to a mattress as they were thrown 250 feet through the air through a field after the tornado swept their Dawson Springs home from its foundation after crushing them underneath it first. Additionally, a photograph from a destroyed home in Dawson Springs was lofted and transported almost 130 miles by the intense tornadic updrafts, eventually being found in New Albany, Indiana. South-southwest of Dawson Springs, a group of storm chasers photographed a possible satellite tornado associated with the parent tornado, but the National Weather Service did not confirm it. Beyond Dawson Springs, the tornado tracked to the northeast, passing north of Isley through the rural community of Carbondale, weakening slightly to high-end EF3 strength but continuing to cause major damage. Farm outbuildings and mobile homes were demolished, and houses sustained major damage or were destroyed. Additional high-end EF3 damage occurred, and another tornado emergency was issued as it moved through Barnsley, just south of Earlington and Helka, and just north of Morton's Gap. Almost every house in the small community was damaged or destroyed, including some that were leveled, though they were not well constructed. A train on the CXS Henderson subdivision adjacent to US 41 in the town was derailed, as were 25 multi-ton freight cars, several of which were thrown from the tracks, and one was tossed into a house. Past Barnsley, the tornado crossed over the CXX cut-off main line and I-69 before passing through an unpopulated, swampy area where large trees were snapped and uprooted and rated at EF2 intensity. Continuing into northern Muhlenberg County, another tornado emergency was issued for the community of Bremen as the tornado approached from the southwest. The tornado abruptly intensified to its peak intensity of high-end EF4 with 190 mile-per-hour winds as it crossed and paralleled Kentucky 175 through the north side of town. Many homes were destroyed along this portion of the path, including several that were completely swept away with little debris remaining. Large trees were debarked, grass was scoured from the ground, and vehicles were thrown into the air and mangled. Some of the worst damage in Bremen occurred along Bethlehem Cemetery Road, where a row of 4 homes were completely swept away with only their foundations remaining. Concrete floor slabs were torn from the foundation of one home and shattered, while the paved driveway of another home was cracked and scoured. Houses that were further away from the center of the damage path sustained roof and exterior wall loss, and mobile homes, barns, garages, and other outbuildings were also destroyed. At Bethlehem Baptist Church, a brick exterior wall was blown out and was shifted slightly off of its foundation, while Church Street General Baptist Church lost much of its roof. 11 people were killed in and around Bremen, and others were seriously injured. Among the fatalities was District Judge Brian Crick, who represented Muhlenberg and McLean counties, as confirmed in a statement from the Supreme Court of Kentucky on December 11th. After the tornado left Bremen, some weakening occurred as it crossed US 431 south of Stroud, where some homes and mobile homes were damaged or destroyed, and hundreds of large trees were snapped. Damage in this area was rated EF2 to low-end EF3. While passing near the Muhlenberg-McLean County line, the tornado weakened substantially as it crossed into Ohio County at 11:10 p.m., producing EF1 damage as it traversed the rugged, hilly terrain to the west of Centertown. The tornado then moved through an abandoned coal strip mine, overturning a large section of a coal conveyor belt, snapping trees and downing power poles. A few farm outbuildings in this area were also damaged or destroyed. The tornado then again strengthened north of Centertown along Kentucky 85, producing EF2 damage. Houses and outbuildings were damaged or destroyed, including a well-built house where much of the roof was torn off and an exterior wall was collapsed. 5 large chicken houses were destroyed, and hundreds of large, hardwood trees along a 1/4-mile swath along this section of the path were snapped and uprooted. Weakening back to EF1 intensity, the tornado downed trees along Carter Ferry Road and Mudd College Road. The tornado then entered a flatter area just west of Hartford and began to intensify once again. Large, steel power poles were bent over or broken along Johnson School Road, earning an EF3 rating. North of Hartford, the tornado crossed US 231, I-165, and Kentucky 69, and crossed the Rough River 3 times. Homes and businesses sustained significant EF3 damage in this area. 2 tractor trailers were lifted and thrown 40 yards, and one of the cabs was poorly mangled. Houses, large barns, garages, a small brick office structure, very large silos, and a fertilizer storage facility were destroyed. The last area of EF3 strength damage occurred along Kentucky 69 and Utley Drive, northeast of Hartford, where a poorly anchored block foundation home was swept away and destroyed, and other houses nearby lost roofs and exterior walls. 2 anchored mobile homes were swept away and destroyed, with their frames tossed and bent, and one was thrown nearly 100 yards. An RV camper in this area was thrown, landing upside down. Tractors and large hay bales were also thrown considerable distances. Damage of up to high-end EF2 intensity occurred beyond this point as the tornado crossed Humble Valley Road, Halls Creek Road, and Mount Vernon Road before passing north of Olathe. Homes were significantly damaged, barns and mobile homes were destroyed, a cow was killed, and thousands of large hardwood trees were downed. The tornado paralleled the Ohio-Grayson County line and very briefly crossed a bend in the Rough River into Grayson County. Hundreds of trees along Cane Ford Road were downed, and an abandoned trailer home was destroyed. The tornado then crossed Kentucky 54, where the last area of EF2 damage occurred, as a frail home was destroyed and left only a few walls standing. Large trees were snapped, and one of them fell on and destroyed a car. Entering Breckinridge County at EF1 intensity, the tornado paralleled the Breckinridge-Grayson County line as it crossed Kentucky 110, northwest of Falls of Rough. Here, hundreds of trees were downed and 2 structures sustained minor damage. The tornado then downed power lines as it crossed Kentucky 79 at EF0 strength, damaged a large boat facility, and scattered sheet metal debris across the runway of a small airport 300 yards to the northeast. Some additional minor tree damage occurred before the tornado dissipated near Park Drive in Grayson County at 11:48 p.m. as it entered the Rough River Dam Strait Resort Park near Rough River Lake, approximately 4 miles west of McDaniels. In total, the tornado reached a peak width of 2,600 yards and was on the ground for nearly 3 hours, tracking 165.6 miles. The path of the tornado was the 9th longest in recorded history. The tornado was rated high EF4 with an estimated peak wind speed of 190 miles per hour. Additionally, the tornado directly caused 57 deaths, making it the deadliest single tornado in the United States since the Joplin, Missouri tornado on May 22, 2011. However, although the extraordinary extent of the damage these tornadoes had caused was already visible, the true extent of the damage would not be visible until sunrise. The tornadoes had produced extreme destruction through multiple communities. In Mayfield, according to the National Weather Service, more than 4,000 structures were damaged or destroyed. This included 3,778 residences, 183 commercial buildings. The tornado destroyed primarily low-income and rental housing units, leading to a depleted stock of affordable housing throughout the city. Mayfield Housing Authority reported it had more than 700 requests for one-bedroom units. In Marshall County, containing the heavily damaged community of Cambridge Shores, 356 structures were destroyed or made uninhabitable. The tornado also directly killed 57 people, resulted in 519 injuries, making it the deadliest tornado ever recorded in the United States in the month of December. In Graves County, 24 people died and more than 200 were injured. 15 died in Hopkins County, 11 in Muhlenberg County, 4 in Caldwell County, and 1 person each in Fulton, Marshall, and a 58th victim also unfortunately suffered a heart attack while clearing debris. On December 11, 2021, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear declared a state of emergency for parts of western Kentucky, and it was followed that day by U.S. President Joe Biden's approval of a federal emergency disaster declaration. Beshear also announced the creation of a tornado relief fund and asked for people to donate blood because the stocks of blood were running low. The National Weather Service office in Paducah requested mental health officers be present to assist meteorologists for potential trauma from assessing the tornado's path. On December 15th, President Joe Biden flew to Kentucky and toured Mayfield and Dawson Springs. Biden also announced that the disaster declaration had been amended to have the federal government pay for the entire cost of debris removal and overtime for law enforcement and emergency personnel. The tornado's major impacts on Graves County court operations, which included the destruction of the courthouse in Mayfield, led the Kentucky Supreme Court to suspend the county's court operations, including physical and electronic court fillings between December 13, 2021 and January 11th. By February 14, 2022, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers had cleared more than 280,000 cubic yards of debris in Graves County, including Mayfield. By April 4th, that number had risen to 265,453 cubic yards of debris removed in Mayfield. Disaster relief and humanitarian groups such as the American Red Cross, the Salvation Army, and World Vision collected donations. In December 2022, a temporary memorial was placed in the Mayfield Court Square. In 2022, Timothy Marshall, a meteorologist, structural and forensic engineer, published a damage survey of the portions of the tornado's track, particularly through Mayfield and Dawson Springs. The report notes the tornado damage rating may have been higher had more wind-resistant structures been encountered. Also, the fast-forward speed of the tornado had little dwell time of the strong winds over a building, and thus the damage likely would have been higher if the tornado were slower. Marshall later stated that in 2023, the Western Kentucky tornado was the closest to EF5 that he can remember since the Moore EF5 of 2013. Marshall also stated that some of the buildings struck by the strongest winds were horribly constructed and could not even resist 100 to 150 mile-per-hour winds, let alone almost 200, meaning it was almost impossible to know if EF5 winds affected them. In the end, the December 10th tornado outbreak caused 89 direct fatalities, injured 676 others, and caused $3.9 billion in damage from the 71 tornadoes that occurred. This outbreak became the deadliest tornado outbreak in December history. 9 states were affected directly by the outbreak, with 5 states being heavily impacted. Although the outbreak caused immense and extremely widespread damage to numerous communities, the support and effort to recover many of these areas was profound. Unfortunately, even years later, many of these communities are still continuing to recover. This video is dedicated to the 89 lives that were lost on the tornadoes on December 10th, 2021. Thank you all so much for watching. This video was by far the longest and most detailed video I've ever made, so I really appreciate you all for staying till here. I also really hope you guys like the new mic. I really had a good time using it, and I'm glad you guys were finally able to get a new mic, because I kind of feel bad with the old crappy mic that, didn't sound the greatest, but I'm glad to finally have a new one, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm really excited to keep using it from now on, and it only was made possible by you guys. You guys are the only reason I bought this mic. Otherwise, I definitely would not have. So I really appreciate you all. I can't wait to keep using it for every video that I make from now on. If you want to help support my channel even further, become a channel member today, and you'll receive numerous behind-the-scenes benefits and perks, including behind-the-scenes videos, posts, chase targets, and all that. I have a bunch of different perks that you guys will have if you want to become a channel member today. But anyways, thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one in 2 weeks. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys later. Goodbye.
Very large tornado directly in front of us.